ever see the clip of Samuel L. Jackson? This is maybe like 10 years ago or something. He's going around promoting a movie, don't know which one, and he's on a morning show. No doubt Samuel L. Jackson at this point had done 100 appearances on every dumb show, promoting whatever movie's next, Snakes on a Plane, whatever it is. And the host of this show, who is a white guy, and that maybe factors into the conversation here, clearly starts talking to Samuel L. Jackson as though he were Lawrence Fishburne. He just got him confused. And come on, you're smart. There could easily be perceived a racial undertone to making that mistake. At the same time, I'm a white guy who sometimes gets one white actor, celebrity confused with the different white. I mean, it just happens. So I have no idea if this poor host is some kind of super angry, flaming racist, or more likely just some guy who made an honest mistake and didn't do his job very well that day and didn't prepare for who was coming on the show. But whatever the case, he humiliated himself. And Samuel L. Jackson, who is razor sharp and quick on his feet, was not going to let it slide. So he just starts badgering this guy, and it's so uncomfortable. And maybe you could watch that and be like, man, Samuel L. Jackson's a jerk. Why would he get after this poor dude who just made an honest mistake? That's a valid take. But also you could look at it and say, I think he's got a legitimate gripe. I mean, just from a journalistic perspective, you should at least know the name of the person you're about to interview or things they've done. You just want to double check that. Two, from a fame perspective, I mean, this is the highest grossing box office actor of literally all time. So you kind of hope that somebody would recognize him. And then I'm making no comment on this one way or the other, but also as you've got potentially racial undertones or questions that might exist there as well. And it was amazing. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus is implicitly expressing a bit of the same indignance. That might not be exactly the right way to characterize it. We'll look at it together. You can figure out what word works better. For people not recognizing him as king. He is sending out the 12 disciples in this big long thing that takes up, is it all of it? I think it's all of 10. Yeah, all of Matthew chapter 10, called the missional discourse, second great big speech of the book of Matthew. And in this missional discourse, he's like, hey, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go tell people about me for the first time. You're going to tell them the kingdom of heaven is near. That's it. It's your only message. And hopefully everyone will know to recognize the king when the king is here. They should be able to look at what we all agree or scriptures from the past that are from God that say this is what it's going to look like when the kingdom is at hand and the king is near. But just in case they can't see those obvious supernatural signs, I'm going to have you do some supernatural stuff too. So it's really extra super double clear. And you don't even need to take anything because they should recognize me as king and they should recognize you as my bannerman, just as it's reasonable to expect to go on a show where you have been booked and have the host know who they're interviewing. So it is even more reasonable, given the supernatural elements of all of this, that Jesus would expect to be recognized by his own people as their king. But what if they don't? Is Jesus going to badger them and make fun of them and make an uncomfortable interview? I don't know. I would really enjoy watching such an interview. Or is there some other way to push back on all of this? Well, it's some other way. And as we read along, we get all this positive language for the 12 to go do this stuff, say this stuff. You don't need to take money. Go into a town, find somebody worthy. When you're in a home, give it your greeting. If the home's deserving, let your peace rest on it. But if it's not, let your peace return to you. Not exactly sure what that phrase means. There are smarter people than me who have theories, and I've heard that it's some sort of notion of an ancient Near Eastern greeting. I've also heard smart people suggest that this is the language of a bannerman or a representative, an ambassador of the king, bearing a message or something, and letting your peace rest on the house is letting the peace of the king rest on that household. I really don't know, and I don't want to fake it. But he goes on to say, if anyone won't welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet when you leave that home or town. I've actually done this a couple of times. I'm not sure if I should be proud of it or ashamed of it, but I'm telling you anyway. I literally am taking off my shoes like Mr. Rogers right now. I literally one time had a just horrific experience with a given situation. I got done. It wrapped up quickly. And I loaded up my stuff and I was leaving. I was like, you know what? There's something in the Bible or whatever. And I scrambled all around until I found this passage. And I was like, I'm not sure if this actually applies or not. But I took off my shoes, which reek, good heavens. And as I was done on my last day of doing this thing that I didn't like very much, I literally dusted off my shoes and I had my wife take a picture of it. Was that entirely fair? No. Is that an entirely good read on the passage? And every time we leave a thing and we don't feel great about how it worked out, that we should literally dust off our sandals? No, probably not. And further, I don't know, my friends, I have learned that when stuff gets weird, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about everything in the moment, then when I look back later and everything's a little less emotional, I tend to have more ownership of the problems around me than I care to admit in the moment. My point is not to say, oh, I had a bad thing happen, I dusted off my sandals. My point is to say there is some impulse within us to, even if we're just imagining it, say, hey, I'm going into a thing with goodwill, I'm going to do my best here, and if that doesn't work out, it's very liberating to have the option to say, well, fine, cool, all right, whatever, I guess we're just done here. But here, I think it was more than that. Here, these people are going out with a direct commissioning from Jesus to do a thing with people who should recognize it. And there's even language at the beginning of chapter 10 that indicates that it's different than you or me having our feelings hurt in a given situation and dusting off our sandals. Because here in verse 1 of chapter 10, it says, he called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority. Okay, disciples. That just means anybody who follows Jesus. In this case, we know it's talking about the inner circle, the people who are really in. But then in verse 2, we switch titles. It says, these are the names of the 12 apostles. Well, an apostle literally means one who is sent. Some people even argued about the legitimacy of the title apostle for Paul because he didn't physically meet Jesus during Jesus' physical human lifetime. It was a different kind of encounter with the resurrected Jesus, according to the text, on the way to Damascus. Apostle is a unique term as a subset of the term disciple. And that distinction would have been more clear to an original Greek-speaking audience. But what they would have known is these people are ambassadors. They are literally sent out by Jesus with literally a commissioning and a message. They are bannermen of the king. And if someone rejects the bannerman of the king who is directly commissioned to go and do kingdom stuff, they are rejecting the king himself. And therefore, to dust off those sandals is more than just a catharsis to be like, haha, I am done with you, you big jerks. It is the peace of the king no longer in any way resting on that household. They are rejecting that household with the authority of the king. And you might be going, that's pretty harsh. I don't know. I've been around some church stuff and religious stuff. And sometimes people get weird about how they quit church or sign up for church or how mad they get when things fall out there. I mean, that can change the entire trajectory of a life when you have a falling out with religious friends or church friends or a church in general. And yeah, it's that shake the dust off the feet thing. That sounds a little bit mean. And I'm not going to lie, that is a little bit intimidating for me as well, because I've just heard a bazillion horror stories of quitting church and signing up for church, getting real weird and going sideways and people getting hurt, and it's hard to untangle or sort out what the deal is there. But we shouldn't compare this situation to that at all, even though I totally just did it a minute ago. Whatever, you know what I mean? And the reason for that is here, again, we have a direct commissioning from the king. And if he is all the things that he says he is, it's completely under his purview to be like, yeah, you're out. Okay, fine. I guess the kingdom's not for you. All right, fine, whatever, it's cool. That's petty and incomplete and assuming the authority and judgment of God if you or me or some TV evangelist person does it. But in this case, they were actually sent out to do this in this unique moment. But as if that social discomfort and that really interesting image of shaking the dust off your feet isn't uncomfortable enough, then Jesus ramps it up even further just to make sure everybody knows he's king and he has authority to judge. Does that make me uncomfortable? Yes. But if anybody's going to be doing the judging, the almighty, all-knowing being who created everything and knows everything about justice and rightness and the motives of the human heart is the only one I'd even be remotely comfortable with having do it. But he goes on to say in verse 15, I tell you the truth, it'll be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. Wow. Right to the Sodom and Gomorrah thing. Now, like you and I hear this now, and even people who have nothing to do with church and aren't into the Bible, haven't read any of it, pretty much everybody's heard about the whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing. I mean, for crying out loud, we named sodomy after it. So, you know, it's out there, and it conjures a lot of images, and it conjures a lot of feelings, and it conjures a lot of political loadedness. It conjures probably for many a lot of inner turmoil, and that is not how the original audience would have heard these words. The connotations of Sodom and Gomorrah, I think, would have been different to the original audience. And because of the sensitivity of the topic, and also because of the severity of the warning and language Jesus is using, I think it merits an entire conversation tomorrow about what on earth he means. Why is Jesus invoking this Old Testament story? How would the original audience have understood it, and what do we do with it now? So we're going to hit pause there, and we're going to get to more scary Jesus, intimidating, angry eyebrow Jesus next time around. In the meantime, I remind you that you and I, my friend, are fellow sojourners on this thing. I don't own the Bible. I'm not in charge of judgment for you or anybody. I don't even know most of you, though I'm sure you're lovely people and I would enjoy knowing you. I'm not reading texts like this and in the back of my mind like, that's what these people need to hear, because only I know how the things are, and I hope this gets through to somebody who's dumb and getting all the things wrong. Hopefully, I'm coming at it just like you. Hopefully, you're coming at it like I am, with goodwill and trying to understand what the document says. And if that leads to some kind of thing where you got to think about where you fit with it or what you do, cool, that's great. But when we get to these points where Jesus is using very direct, very appropriately judgmental language if he is the king, I understand that can conjure a lot for all of us. That can flash us back to some of our weirder moments with church and religion and ideas and authority in general. And just know that I view us as peers in this conversation and do not for a second imagine that because I'm the guy who spent a couple $100 on a microphone and I'm reading the text from the Bible, that I'm the one who's in charge. So thank you for hearing me out on that little disclaimer as we get ready to tear into, frankly, some pretty difficult text tomorrow. All right. I appreciate you. I'm Matt. This is a 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do it again soon.